whichever way you cut it, whichever way you looked at it, it was the day of Red Bull and Max Verstappen, quickest in both the afternoon session and then the early evening session. The early evening session chiming in with the time of the race on Sunday at this, well, they keep calling it a street circuit. I mean, it just looks like a sort of flat out blind with lots of DRS zones and chicanes to me. But anyway, yeah, lots of very precise driving required on the high speed corners, although it's pretty much line locked in terms of what you got to do with the car. You're either going to make a slight error on entry and have to back off, or not back off and take the runoff area in the middle of a chicane, or not really. That's choices there. So it's not a particularly inspiring circuit, but in terms of producing a race, lots of overtaking, 3 DRS zones, the third slightly adjusted so that we don't have quite as much banking up as we had last year. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself describing the way the race and the circuit is going to go because, yeah, it was Max's day, just superb, really. He was sort of doing what world champions do when they know they've got yet another great car beneath them, and that is not going out really until about 25 minutes into the first session. Let everybody else clean up the track, then he goes out. In his second lap, he was quicker than anybody. On his third lap, he was the only guy under 1 minute 30. And in the afternoon, in the evening, he went even quicker than that. Fernando also got under that barrier, but in the Aston Martin, but it was Max always who was just that little bit ahead. And as we'll see in a little bit, when I put up some of the long runs, you'll see the incredible top speed advantage that Red Bull have also got in doing that lap time. And if you've got a top speed advantage over a car like an Aston Martin, which has really efficient aero, as we know from Bahrain and as we know from today, then you can look after your tyres and then you can plan your race and do a bit of overtaking. So if you're thinking about the sort of battle behind Max and Alonso and potentially it's Charles Leclerc versus, I don't know, Checo Perez, Perez has just got to cruise it because he knows how quick he is in a straight line, how much quicker the Red Bull is in a straight line. And that's where the beauty of that car lies. All credit, yet again, to Adrian Newey and his team. Just amazing how they were able to build on what they had last year and make it a much better racing car all round with very little change in the regulations, relatively speaking, despite the penalties they've had to live with over the winter, the natural ones from winning the championship and also the actual penalties for that budget cap infringement. So they've just done an amazing job. Fernando, very, very good all day in the Aston Martin, looked really confident, looked as if he was enjoying himself. Just the Fernando Alonso we've known and loved since the early 2000s, and looking just the same in the car. This is his sort of circuit, really. You know, lots of blind corners where you just go for it and you're just relying on reflexes. Could be a bit of traffic that will come into play, and Fernando's pretty good in those traffic situations as well. Whereas you see other drivers just backing off completely and having the time, nonetheless, to get on the radio and start cursing and swearing. But Fernando just deals with it and he's off. So yeah, he looks really good. Looks really good again. But if there's a big difference out there between the Red Bull and the Aston, it's that the Red Bull is much quicker in a straight line than the Aston Martin. We saw that in Bahrain, but here on this high-speed circuit, well, very high speed, you really see it. And the Red Bull, just incredible how it was eating up the Aston in terms of top speed. Not really fair to be saying that because the Aston Martin is still amazingly good compared with, well, just about everything. Alpine looked really good today, I thought. We saw how well Pierre Gasly went in the race in Bahrain. Scarbs played that down a bit when I did a video with him after the race and said, oh, well, you know, Alpine need to lift their game. But to me, that was a really good drive. And as I said, in one of the follow-up videos, his race time and his lap times mirrored those of Lance Stroll in the other Aston Martin, albeit a Lance Stroll with wrist and hand injuries still. So that was not to be forgotten, and it proved so today. Alpine looking really good, and Ocon and Gasly both quick on light fuel and on heavy fuel and long runs. So that's a positive for them. It's actually a negative, of course, for us, for Mercedes, because now they can look at the times and think, well, we're actually not even as good as the Alpines now, and we're slipping back. They're not looking great. They're not looking great on light fuel, and looking great on fuel runs either. So let's have a look at all that. Everybody was out there doing these long runs in the evening session, which, as I say, chimes in with the race on Sunday in terms of ambient, in terms of the time of the day and everything else, track temperature. And you can see, first of all, a variety of choice of tyres. You can see Max obviously on the soft tyre, Red Bull splitting their options, putting Sergio Perez on the medium, and the same with Mercedes, Lewis on the soft and George Russell on the medium. The medium looks to be a really good race tyre, you got to say. Max not brilliantly quick on that run, although he was complaining throughout of exactly the same problem he talked about in the race in Bahrain, a slow downshift, particularly when he's going down through all the gears from 8th down to probably 1st for the last corner, turn 27 or something ridiculous. Sorry, shouldn't be saying that. So yeah, Max had that gear downshift problem. So you can see there, I mean, he was super quick on light fuel in very few laps, but here he is doing his long run this afternoon. So the thing to note there is what I've been going on about, the top speed. So you can see, generally speaking, he's doing 312, 313, 326 later on in that run is obviously a tow, but he's in the sort of 310, 312, 313 region. Now just go across to Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari and look at the average top speeds of Charles. Okay, third lap, 322, that's obviously a tow, but look at everything else. Scratching to get over 300 kilometers an hour. Actually slower on average in terms of top speed than the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton there, which is comfortably over 300, but still way, way south of the Red Bull. I put them there because in the order there, because I think to do a direct comparison between Max and Fernando Alonso is really relevant to what potentially we're going to see on Sunday. And you can see there, well, first of all, remember Max was complaining about that downshift problem, and it wasn't enough to bring him into the pits and stop that simulation, but that simulated run, but it was enough possibly to eat into some of his lap time. So Fernando Alonso, if you look at that, you'd say, wow, the Aston Martin is in really good shape, apart from its top speed. So you take any given lap, 35.2, say Max's fourth lap there, 35.2, 312 kilometers an hour in a straight line, and that is without a tow. Fernando Alonso, 35.2 on the medium tyre, exactly the same lap, fourth lap out of the pits, 303 kilometers an hour. So he's asking much more of the tyres and the car, particularly on the slower corners, to do the same lap time. And that will, of course, add up over the race distance. And that's going to be the fundamental difference between the Red Bull and the Aston Martin. Not detracting in any way from the job the Aston engineers have done over the winter, because they've done an incredible job. Next one along, Sergio Perez, who actually had the best long run of all in the other Red Bull, just confirming how good that car is on the medium tyre. So that was great information for Red Bull. They didn't run any long runs in the morning. They just used the afternoon session. They just used that to set the car up, and they just stayed on the soft tyre throughout that FP1. But in FP2, they split their options, and there's Sergio showing how good that medium tyre is, how relatively quick it is. I mean, third lap, he's doing 35.2 on the medium tyre. Very impressive. First lap, 35.1. And no deg at all, really. I mean, look at that. 34.9, 34.8, 34.8, 34.7, 34.6 at the end of his run. And again, top speeds, 3.11, 3.14. He's a little bit in and out. There's a lot of traffic there, and he's getting tows as well. But again, you can just see how comfortably they are 5 or 6 kilometers an hour quicker than the Aston Martin. So that's, that was a really impressive run. Look at all that run. Look at all those laps under 135. Really, really good. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. Again, he had a slight question mark about his engine. At one point he said, is the engine okay? Everybody at Ferrari super nervous, obviously, after the start they had in Bahrain. And they checked all the telemetry, everything looked okay. And he said, it looked like some sort of power surge, but okay, carry on. And you can see there sort of direct comparison with Sergio Perez, because those two probably will be racing relatively closely. But again, you're seeing more deg on the Ferrari. It's asking more of its tyres. Why? Because it's not as quick in a straight line for the given lap time. And so Charles having to cane it. And 301, 302, 305, Sergio Perez, 311, 311, 311. I mean, res ipsa loquitur, as my good friend Sheridan Thin used to say at Williams, which basically means, so be it. Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes it's not a truly representative long run because he went from softs and then to the medium, scratching for grip all day, not happy, still very consistent, still driving beautifully, but I just can't imagine what he's thinking at the moment. I mean, having to drive this car second year in a row now, and he's driving it on the absolute limit, super consistent, 35.3, 35.4, 35.5. When Lewis is doing that, you know that's the limit. And, look how slow he is, relatively speaking. And so they went on to the medium. Yeah, went a bit quicker on the medium towards the end, but again, massive difference in top speed. I suppose the only thing you could say there is that Mercedes do not appear to be very far away from Ferrari. Indeed, it's about where they were in Bahrain. Probably they'll be racing with the Ferraris. They won't be up there with Alonso, but they'll be racing with the Ferraris. And George Russell had a pretty good day, I've got to say. I haven't got him up there just because it's been a long day and didn't get round to doing everything. But 35.2, I'll just read George's times out. 35.2, 35.4, 35.2, 35.2, 35.3. George on the medium tyre, remember. And then finishing with 35.4, 35.7, 35.6. So, yeah, a good day of accumulating information for Mercedes. They'll be looking to get, if they're lucky, a P3, P4, but they won't get near Alonso. They might get near Stroll. They might get ahead of Sainz, but to beat Ferrari, it's pretty close between those two. The only thing you could say there is it appears as if the Mercedes has got a slight top speed advantage over the Ferrari as well. Whether overnight they will continue with that or whether they will parlay that into giving them a little bit more downforce, we'll see tomorrow. And I put Pierre Gasly there. He was on the soft tyre. You can see there that he's, as I say, Mercedes have got to say, well, right now, we're not actually quicker than Alpine. I mean, look at Pierre Gasly's run. 34.8, 35.5, 35.3, 35.1, 34.8, 35.4, 35.5. I mean, really, really good. Slower in a straight line. They got a lot of downforce on that car quite clearly this year. Slower in a straight line than the Mercedes. And that may be part of the discussion at Mercedes tonight as to how much wing to take off, if any, when they're looking at what the Alpine's doing. And equally, Alpine may try and take off something. I doubt they've got any more wing to take off, but they might. But the Alpine, a good car, not a bad car at all. So that was it, the two Red Bulls in a class of their own, Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez having a perfect day, really, in terms of how they work together as two drivers in the same team, as the team works with both drivers, and in the way the two cars performed. Just brilliant. Slight gearbox problem, as I say, for Max. Fernando Alonso had a good day, and everybody else wondering how they can make up the ground for tomorrow, if indeed they can make up the ground for tomorrow. We'll see then. Take care.